Max Olson, theathletic.com, was at Big 12 Media Days. Max, other than, okay, what did you learn or whatever, was there anything that you learned that you didn't really know much about when you get coaches off to the side or players off to the side? Anything that kind of jumped off the page at you?
Yep, I'm here to give away all the secrets I learned this week. Here we go. No, I'm kidding. It's funny, guys, like on Wednesday, and maybe this is just sort of a sign of the times or whatever, but there were, I think, 4 athletic directors at media days, which we usually don't see. And I found I was kind of gravitating towards talking to them a little more about what's going on here with realignment and the future of the conference and Brett Yormark and the pursuit of the Pac-12 schools and all that, because, it seems like that, it seems like things are cooking right now in that front. So I probably missed out a little bit of time with coaches and players, but certainly interesting to pick their brain. And I got to sit down with Brett Yormark on Wednesday and talk for about 25 minutes. And everything I heard about him seemed pretty true, that this guy is aggressive, and he has come into the Big 12 to be a deal maker. And I think he's really excited about the possibility of trying to go raid the Pac-12.
Well, there you go. I was going to ask you, man. I mean, like that, he did not shy away from the talks about, being aggressive and the realignment part of it and walking in right at the time that this was all going on. I mean, I read your piece with him, and also, of course, listened to his press conference and then him sitting with us. And, I mean, he's a mover and a shaker, Max. So what do you think that says for the Big 12 kind of moving forward? Do you think there's a sense of, okay, we've got a guy in here who's going to help stabilize and help us grow, albeit in a different direction? Or kind of what was your sense as amongst the Big 12 community once he was done talking?
Yeah, this is why they hired him, and obviously hired him very recently. But I think this is, you look at the way that search went and who the finalists were, they were people from outside of the college athletics industry in some ways, or had not maybe been ADs most recently or things like that. I think the Big 12 viewed their position as one where they need to maximize the revenue, maximize their brand, do whatever they can to, keep up with the SEC and Big Ten and try to get ahead of the Pac-12 and ACC. And so I think there's, maybe because you've just gone through that search, I think there is a lot of alignment among the presidents and ADs behind Brett Yormark in saying, okay, this is what we're hiring him to do, to go out and make moves and be bold and do things that give the Big 12 a chance to be a lot more prosperous. And so, yeah, what you heard him say repeatedly was, that any moves the Big 12 makes has to be additive. I know he's considering several different options here, but this is a guy who's not sitting around waiting until August 1 to start making changes here. I think he sees a real opportunity here, and the question really is can he, this wild card, this guy that doesn't necessarily know these Pac-12 presidents and stuff like that, can he convince them to be bold and make a change here?
Do you feel like because he's such an unknown that's what the Big 12 kind of needed? Someone who's not, with all due respect to some of those who have been around college athletics for a long, long time, stuck in the mud and have their alliance, I hate that word, have their kind of like their buddies?
I think that that's a good question. I think that there's a lot of aspects of the commissioner job that Brett Yormark doesn't really know anything about, and he will admit that. And I think that Bob Bowlesby will be a good asset for him in terms of helping understand the actual day-to-day of the job. But you're right. At the same time, we are heading towards this period of immense change, of transformational change. And so to have a commissioner who, and I'm not saying Bob Bowlesby did this, but in terms of looking at the landscape and who you want to hire to lead you through this, you don't let somebody who's just trying to protect the way things used to be completely. And that's not to say, that there's certainly a downside to totally tossing those things out and going all money, all business, forget the student-athlete experience. But, yeah, I think in terms of trying to protect the old NCAA and the old way things have been, I think there's probably less value in that now going forward. And at this particular moment, and really with the TV deal ahead and with this realignment, wave kind of continuing, I think you need someone who really is probably a businessman and knows the right principles and all that stuff and knows how to negotiate and get deals done.
So even though there hasn't been any new bombshells really since USC, UCLA, we know there's been lots of stuff going on behind the scenes. And I mean, Brett Yormark stoked the flames as much as anybody when he said what he said. But where do you kind of see us right now, Max, as far as where the realignment is. I mean, obviously there was that story about the California system, and the governor was completely unaware of, UCLA making their move, and there's that kind of going on, although it doesn't seem like that's going to massively change anything as far as I can tell. The ACC's obviously still figuring out what they're going to do. The Pac's in negotiation, so to speak. Where are we right now in your mind with the realignment phases?
Well, if you think back to last summer and just the panic that was set off in the Big 12 for those 2 months after the news came out of Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC, I mean, you remember that the Big 12 did what they did in adding the 4 new schools because they couldn't just sit with this cloud hanging over them for the rest of the year or another year or even longer. You went out and added schools because you needed resolution. You didn't want this to overshadow the football season and all your other sports seasons and your whole academic year and everything. And so I think it's tempting to say, things will maybe settle down here a little bit. We're waiting on Notre Dame, stuff like that. But I think there could be more change here pretty soon. I really do. Now, it's maybe a question of what does the Big 12 want to do and can they pull it off? But certainly, as you guys alluded to, Brett Yormark is really assessing multiple options here, and I think when the board's behind him in pursuing whatever he thinks is best. So, for those 4 Pac-12 schools in the Pac-12 South that are kind of in a weird position here, I wonder. I mean, can they sit and wait for this 30-day window on getting some information on a TV deal with ESPN or whoever? Can they kind of sit back and try to gather more information on that? Or, is this kind of a moment where you have to, maybe think about doing something pretty aggressive here and getting out of the conference? Or can the Big 12 and the Pac-12 actually work together? You've seen plenty of people point to that and say maybe there's more value if they're, going about this together as opposed to, going against each other and eat or be eaten. I think that there certainly could be some things that happen here pretty quickly if those schools are willing to defect.
I got the impression, and Craig and I know you guys had Q&A with him plus his press conference, but we had him for a good 12 or 15 minutes, whatever it was. And I got the impression what I liked about him is we would ask a question, and some of them were probably a little bit more difficult for him to know at this particular time. But he was kind of a give and take. He would kind of maybe lean against us a little bit. And I like that. I really, really liked the way that thing went and how he handled sometimes. For example, have you offered anybody to join the conference? And there was this long, very long pause. And then he again, officially no. And you had to read between the lines on that.
That's funny. I have to go back and listen to your interview with him. I'm sure it was great. Yeah, I think this is a guy that, he is walking into this, and he seemed pretty genuine in his answers to me. And in someone who, I asked him, what is your relationship to college football? Because I think his background is clearly, much more in basketball over the course of his 30-plus years in pro sports. And he was honest and said, not much. I mean, I went to Indiana. I'm an Indiana fan. His daughter goes to Indiana, so he's been to a few games because of that. He watches some on TV, but, he was willing to admit, that hasn't really necessarily been a big part of my career so far. And he's looking forward to going out to all these campuses and going to a ton of games this year and immersing himself in it. But this is not someone who's going to pretend, that he's an expert on all things about this job, because it is such a departure from everything he's done. At the same time, I think he sees elements of this job that fit what he did at NASCAR, fit what he did with the Nets, and especially right now in this kind of chaotic moment where, there's real opportunity right now.
Max, it seemed even though, there was that bombshell after Big 12 Media Days last year, and we've had now the last several months to talk about Oklahoma and Texas, that everything, the water seemed kind of calm. I mean, there's all the other outside noise going on as far as realignment and everything, but in terms of the current 10, everything seems pretty, professional and business-like, but certainly he was asked, Yormark, about OU and UT, and what did you think of the way he addressed that as far as, maintaining that open for business? He didn't say give away too much, I don't think. I think certain people tried to read maybe more into that, but how did you take his comments about Oklahoma and Texas and potential negotiations?
I think his comment, I believe it was up on the podium that, in these things, he tends to look for a win-win deal. That is definitely the first time anyone's tried to put it in those terms when it comes to the Big 12 side of that conflict. You know what I mean? Really, I think it's been quite a silent standoff ever since last summer. And so, will that be will Brett Yormark have a totally different perception of that situation? I think that's possible. I'm not saying that they're going to get out in 23 or anything like that, but I think if I were an Oklahoma or Texas fan, maybe I'd be slightly more optimistic that this is a guy that maybe for the right price, or if let's say the Big 12 goes out and adds 4 more schools. He said this week he doesn't see those as kind of interrelated issues, but could he see a Texas and Oklahoma divorce as part of the maneuvering here? That's where I think we're all sort of trying to get a read. And he said he looked forward to sitting down and having that, or that at some moment in time they will sit down and have that conversation with Texas and Oklahoma. It's hard to sort of prognosticate how that goes when there's no precedent on it. But that's certainly an issue that I think will be high up on his list. And who knows? Maybe he'll have a very different take on it, or maybe he'll just go by what the presidents want to do, and maybe continue for this to be a stalemate.
Yeah, I was in the stands or whatever we are, where the media sits when he said win-win. And I got to tell you, my first reaction is hell no. I mean, I know I know that, but for the 8 teams that are trying to remain strong and have remained strong, and a couple of the guys that were outside with programs that are not a part of Texas and Oklahoma, they're like, there's no win-win here. But I get what he meant by that.
Right. It's about do we get what we want out of them, and do they get out when they want to get out? Right. That would be the win-win. It wouldn't be. And look, I think, if we're being honest, in the realignment and all this stuff, the commissioners are not the puppeteers in all this. It's ESPN and Fox. And so is there a way in which ESPN gets involved in that situation and kind of make that right for all parties? I think that's a possibility. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but certainly, there is the new SEC TV deal coming up, and, there is the Longhorn Network issue and all those things. Is it possible that ESPN can get involved and be the third party that helps kind of make the money right for everybody? I suppose these are the kind of things that, Brett Yormark may have to explore here going forward.
Max, you had a piece on new Oklahoma quarterback Dillon Gabriel. We got a chance to talk to him yesterday. Absolutely loved talking to Dillon Gabriel. Seemed like a great guy. What were your impressions and discussing with him? Obviously, what was the Dime Time Retreat, I guess as it was called, and just his I guess feel for the program in Oklahoma and the expectations and all that comes with that.
Were you guys surprised by his size a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit.
Absolutely. He's thick, and I mean that in a very complimentary way, but I was very surprised about, and again, he probably has a chip on his shoulder about.
No, for sure. That's why that guy was not a 4-star recruit.
Absolutely.
He's going to be one of the shorter starting quarterbacks in the Big 12, but that's also how he got this far, by being, an ultra productive guy at UCF. That was a great eval by their staff and by Jeff Lebby to get him there out of Hawaii. And yeah, this is a kid that, when he's healthy, I think he has a chance to be the best quarterback in the Big 12 this season, because I think he really fits what they're doing there offensively. And as much as they lost a lot, I think with Eric Gray and Marvin Mims and Theo Weiss, some of the playmakers they've got, I think they're still going to have a chance to, when that thing's clicking, and as long as Dillon Gabriel's healthy, have a chance to put up a lot of points. And yeah, I wrote a story just off my talk with Dillon yesterday about the Dime Time Retreat he did. They went down to Lawton, Oklahoma last month. He and about 15 of his teammates, and did a 2-night Airbnb stay at a 9-acre ranch, and went and threw the ball around and went out to a lake, played golf, played video games and all that. This is a guy that he's a leader. He's a winner and he's a leader. And I think the way I just find the transfer quarterback experience so interesting, because so many guys are going through it now. But this is a guy that has really proven himself to his teammates, and now is trying to show them, hey, here's what my version of leadership looks like. And I think that, he really wanted to speed up kind of the connections and the friendships they have on that team, because it's such a new group. I mean, they even brought in, I think, 6 new transfers on that offensive side just this summer. So, there's a lot of moving pieces there, a lot of inexperience, but it's going to be fun to see how he and Brent Venables are really able to kind of put that all together and pull it off this year.
Max, speaking of moving pieces, and I know you got to go soon, but we could talk for a couple hours about just all the storylines in the Big 12 this year, from the coaches and the transfers and just expectations. Rather than
who was your guys' favorite interview this week?
I'd
of
say
all the ones that came through.
I mean, Bijan was great. Dylan Gabriel's great. Those two were yesterday, and I enjoyed those.
Dylan Doyle. No, I know we covered Baylor, but I thought that Dylan Doyle and Bryson Jackson were looking in a mirror at Dave Aranda of what he would want in football players.
Isn't it funny how these guys start to talk like the coach over time?
Yeah, for sure.
There was think and talk like him. Yeah.
Absolutely. And here's Bryson, a 6-year player who Aranda mentioned to me kind of in early November, when he made some plays, and he was like, he is so close to breaking completely out to becoming his own, his own brand, so to speak, as a football player.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, Max, let's leave it on this. Like I said, there's a bunch of storylines, coaching changes, all of that. Rather than go one by one, maybe what was just something that stood out to you from a team, a player, a coach that maybe jostled your expectations or boosted them, however you want to phrase that, just a kind of takeaway or two from Big 12 media days overall.
Yeah, one of the wild cards I think of this Big 12 season that is going to be pretty interesting is JT Daniels in West Virginia, and it was. I got to talk with Neil Brown a little bit off to the side about that situation. And, Neil Brown's super high on him. I mean, he didn't come in for the spring. He was a post-spring transfer. And so obviously there's a lot to catch up on. And when you talk about that leadership I mentioned earlier, a little bit more challenging for him, even though he's such a veteran guy to walk into a new place and, prove himself and get, that's another situation where they have a brand new OC and Graham Harrell, and they're trying to learn something new and something fast and try and get it right. But Neil Brown is really high on him. He said he's the smartest quarterback he's ever been around, and that he feels really good about the process they've gone through here over these past couple months of getting him prepared. He has some familiarity with Graham in the past, but I think that that's one of those teams. When you look at this conference, you guys know there's a lot of teams that you feel like they're maybe kind of in that 6 to 8 win range, but can you do what Baylor did last year, right, and kind of win some of those close games and surprise people? K-State's maybe been the team I've been high on as a sleeper, but West Virginia, if you saw the difference last year with their quarterback play, I think they kind of look at him and feel like can he make us 2 or 3 wins better? That's maybe a little bit too ambitious, but man, if that guy's really good, and people haven't seen it in a while, but if that guy's really good, I think West Virginia is another tough team in this conference.
Thank you, buddy. And as Craig said, we could go forever, but damn it.
Yeah, it was a fun couple days. I mean, I think there's a lot to talk about coming out of that.
We do enjoy the segment with you, man. We really, really do. It's great to see you, Max. Glad you got home safe.
Appreciate y'all.
Thank you, buddy. That's Max Olson, theathletic.com. Does a great job of covering college football and, of course, a part of theathletic.com.
And their story